So the whole idea in terms of dying, if you study these teachings and you practice meditation, what happens with dying is, instead of it being something that is terrifying or something that you are afraid of, through these practices and through these teachings and through these understandings, that can become very different in terms of the way you understand death and the way you understand dying. And through these teachings and practices, if that does become different, I mean, that's one of the attractions to these teachings and practices, is that it will give you a different way of dealing with things like sickness, old age, and death. It'll give you a different way. It'll make it possible for you to enjoy your older years. It'll make it possible for you to be much more relaxed. And when it comes to death, what happens through these teachings and practices is you come to an understanding that really allows you to relax and let go when the time comes, instead of resisting and fighting it or trying to stop it. Through these teachings and practices, you can come to an understanding that you can really simply let go. And part of the practice is to practice letting go in life, letting go of fear. How do you let go of fear? Well, the way you let go of fear is you stop trying not to be afraid. That's how you let go of fear. You stop trying not to be afraid. And instead of trying not to be afraid, you start to pay attention to fear with curiosity. What is this? What is fear? Fear are these sensations in the body. They're related to this idea that something's terrible is going to happen, or something's going to happen to the body. And so through these teachings and practices, you can really start to come to a new understanding about fear, about death, about sickness, about old age, about the things that are the challenges of a human life. And it becomes possible to learn about the mind, to learn about the brain, to learn about the truth. And the truth has to do with who we really are, the true self. The truth has to do with what is really happening here. What is this life? What is really happening here? Where was I before I was born? Where will I be after I'm dead, after the body dies? Why am I here? How do I relate to this experience that I'm having of my life in a way that will allow me to be satisfied, that will allow me to feel happy, that will allow me to feel relaxed, content, at ease? These are the things that human beings want more than anything, and they go through all kinds of trials and tribulations to try and get those experiences. And many people believe that if you have money, you can be happy. If you have a good plastic surgeon, you can be beautiful. If you get enough control, if you control enough material possessions, maybe you'll beat this game and be happy. Right? But anybody that really pays attention, it doesn't take long for you to realize that none of those things really produce any consistent experience of well-being, happiness, contentment. And so then it becomes evident why these practices have existed for so many thousands of years, because human beings have found that through learning, through the teachings, through these practices, you can come to a place where you can relax, feel at home in this life, feel at home in this body, see things in a way that is different, that helps you to understand how to be, how to relate to this life, how to be with other people, how to be with the people in your family, how to be with yourself, how to deal with the challenges of life. So through these practices and teachings, it's really possible to get to a place where you are in a relaxed state, your body is healthier, you can live longer, you're not wasting as much energy, you're able to enjoy life and appreciate life and have gratitude, be grateful for being here instead of being part of the human spoiled brat race. Right? The human spoiled brat race, right? Because human beings, generally speaking, are like big babies, you know, spoiled brats, you know. What I have is mine, don't touch it, you know. It's like a 2-year-old, you know. Don't touch my new car, don't touch my money, don't touch my house. Don't look at me the wrong way. Don't say the wrong thing around me, you know. And so we live in a world that's given by this idea that we're all separate from one another and we're separate from life. And because that's the case, we have to look out for ourselves, you know. We have to protect ourselves from each other. We have to protect ourselves from the weather. We have to protect ourselves from life. And so we become neurotic and we spend a lot of time in our heads worrying about everything, trying to figure out a way to be in control, trying to figure out a way to relax, trying to figure out a way to survive this experience. And you know, that's an important thing to take note of, you know, that most of humanity is trying to get through this, you know, trying to survive this experience. Most of humanity is trying to get from Monday to Friday unscathed, right? And so this is a very important thing to take note of, you know, that the opportunity to experience life and to enjoy being here for this brief period of human life, that opportunity is missed by most people because they're trying to get through this thing. You know, they're trying to survive instead of enjoy. And so you have the language that expresses that type of thing in terms of, you know, the looking forward becomes a big deal when you're living life that way. You know, looking forward, getting through the day, looking forward to the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the month, the end of the year. And if you really start to pay attention to that philosophy, looking forward to the end of things, right? At some point it blows up in your face, because if you're looking forward to the end of things, one of the things that people look forward to is the end of their career, when I retire, right? But that particular situation blows up in your face because once you get to the retirement, then the next looking forward to is what? And people don't necessarily look forward to death, right? So they don't say, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to my death." You know, I'm really looking forward to retirement, and then after that, I'm looking forward to my death. You don't hear that, right? You do hear people say, "I'm looking forward to retirement." And then when they retire, they have more time to worry about dying. Right? So one of the reasons that people take up meditation and study these teachings and practices is because they don't want to be crazy. They don't want to suffer. You know, and unless you figure something out, unless you come across the way out, and you're just another human being doing what most of humanity does, your life will be like most of humanity. You know, you'll have, you know, if you're fortunate and you live in this country, you know, you may have enough money to take care of yourself and keep trying hard to get more. And so, you know, you will just do what human beings do. You know, they try hard to be in control. They try hard to get as much money as possible. They try hard to have the relationships work and be happy. And that all ends up with prescription medication. I mean, according to Eastern teachings, that's the whole issue in a nutshell. You know, that people aren't present for their life. If you're not present for your life, then whatever you're experiencing isn't life, it's some thought experiment. You know what I mean? you're in some thought experiment, you know, where you're thinking about life instead of living it. And the thing about it is it's not that people, it's interesting really, because when you look closely, it's not that people aren't in the moment, right? It's not that people aren't in the moment. It's that people are in the moment, but they're not aware of it. You know what I mean? In other words, it's like what Paul Hederman says, you know, it's like the idea of being here now is a little tricky, right? Because you are here now, right? You are actually here now. You know, your body's in present time. You know, you are actually in the present moment. You can't be anywhere else, right? It's impossible to be anywhere else. However, although you can't be anywhere else, you can imagine you are. That's why in Buddhism they call the typical human life a dream. You're imagining that you're in the present moment. You can look at the clock and you can say, okay, I'm here, that's there, I'm in the present moment, right? But the whole thing is being experienced in your head through thinking, right? Through conceptualization. So you're thinking you're in the present moment, right? But the thinking is thinking about being in the present moment, not experiencing the present moment. So we have to practice being in the present moment because we have learned not to be. We have to practice being in the present moment because we have learned that to be in the present moment means to think, right? To think. If you're being thoughtful, right, you can imagine you're in the present moment, right? But the reality of it is that's not the present moment, and to find that out, you have to practice something called meditation. In meditation, we move the attention from thinking to being aware of the body breathing. And when we come out of thinking, which is time-bound, when we come out of thinking, which is conceptual, when we come out of thinking, which is about life, not the experience, direct experience of life, and we come to the awareness of the body breathing, now we're in the present moment, because the body is in the present moment, the breath is in the present moment, so we're using the breath as an anchor to anchor us to the now. And then, of course, what happens is a thought happens and we're pulled back to the thought process because we have established a very deep and significant habit of thinking rather than being, right? So we think thinking is being. We think thinking is being. We think thinking means that you're experiencing what's happening, but you're not. You're experiencing thoughts about what's happening. And there is no satisfaction in that experience. There is a lot of suffering in that experience, right? Because the thinking we do about what's happening, right, is fear-based. We think fearful things. We are anxious. We're concerned, right? The thought process is a fear-based process. It's a process in which there's a constant concern about what's happening. Am I okay? Is this okay? Was it okay yesterday? Will it be okay tomorrow? Like that. And it's a constant thing. And so it's an uncomfortable experience. You know, being alive for most human beings is an uncomfortable experience because they're caught up in this thought process that's fear-based, right? That's anxious, that's concerned, that's driving them constantly, you know, to get in control, right? And so it's an uncomfortable experience to be alive. But don't worry, we have television. Right? We have television, and not only do we have television, but we have 500 channels now. You don't even have time to decide what to watch. You don't even have time to look at all those channels and figure out what to watch, right? And then if that's not enough, we have the internet, right? You can go to the internet, spend time in the internet, right? And we have all kinds of diversions, sports, entertainment, pornography. And if the state of mind you're in isn't what you would like it to be, we have marijuana. It's legal in New Jersey. You can get a medical marijuana card in most states. It'll be legal soon. Don't worry about it, right? And you can, with your marijuana, you can have some alcohol, and then you can take some prescription medications to get to sleep, and then you can have some energy drink when you wake up so you can get some energy, right? And you can just go through your life, you know, being this entity that spends your time either trying to make money or when you're not trying to make money, you're trying to escape from the experience you're having of your life. So working and making money and then escaping from experiencing life. And you know, and that wears the body out, and it's where you spend all your energy between there and paying the lawyers for all the breakups that you go through in your life and so forth. Maybe relationship is the most difficult area for people's lives. I was thinking about this the other day. When I look back at my life, and I don't think I'm that unusual. I am unusual, but not that unusual. I think that I think that I'm like most people in the sense that the place that the unworkability of life shows up more than anything else is in relationships, right? That's where I did most of my suffering, in relationships, right? And there are lawyers that will vouch for me. And I think if you look in your own life, it's probably true. Relationship is where your failure. Relationship is where your failure to fulfill on the potential you have as a human being. That's where that failure shows up more than anything else. You know what I mean? Because when you get in close to somebody, right? Because we're survival machines. When you get in close to somebody, right, and you have to deal with, you know, how can I deal with getting what I want, which is to be intimate and be close, right? And at the same time feel safe. That's where the whole thing becomes a big challenge for most people, right? Because people identify themselves not just in a physical body, but people identify themselves as being this character called me, right? And the survival and the safety of this character called me is just as important as the survival and safety of the physical body. Actually more important than the survival of the body. People will give up the body in order to survive as a personality. Did you get that? People will give up the body to survive as a personality. If you identify with a personality and that personality identifies with something beyond the personality, like a country or a religion, right? You'll die for your country, you'll die for your religion, you'll die for love, right? So the body is something that it's part of the identity, but it is less important than the personality in terms of survival. Now, this whole thing becomes a cosmic joke when you come to the realization that at least the body is here and real, right? The personality is not here and it isn't real. And yet you're willing to trade the body off for that, right? So that just goes to show what the word insane means, right? So when you learn these teachings and you do these practices, you're going sane. You're coming out of the crazy way that people attempt to live their lives. And you're starting to get yourself grounded in reality so that the personality stops being who you think you are. And that happens just by your paying attention and looking and seeing the truth, which is that this thing called the personality is not physical. It's nothing other than a psychological idea that I have learned and that I have identified myself as, that I am this character called me. I have a name, I have a story, I have a history, I have a future, I have a life. So when it becomes evident that the personality is not actually real, it doesn't actually exist, but it's actually a conditioned idea, a conditioned entity, a conditioned psychological entity that you identify yourself as. When that becomes evident and that becomes real, then the question arises, well, if I'm not that personality, what am I? Who am I, right? And this is what the Eastern teachings tell us is the beginning of your seeking and the beginning of coming to discover the truth. You can't discover the truth unless you're asking a question about it. You can't discover who you are unless you ask the question, who am I? Now, you didn't get an opportunity to ask that question when you were a baby, right? Because you didn't even have language. You couldn't ask a question. You were at the effect of the people that came before you. And so you're born here as a baby, you're told, okay, you're your body, here's your name, your personality. And as a baby, you don't have any options. You don't have any alternatives in terms of to consider any other possibilities, right? But then after you start to live the life as that body and as that personality, you start to notice, it doesn't take too long for you to start to notice that this isn't necessarily an easy life. This isn't necessarily an easy way to experience your existence. One of the teachers that I've been studying recently, he said, I didn't know exactly what it was that was wrong, but I knew from very early on in my life, through my teenage years to my early adult years, that I was not having a good time. I was uncomfortable in my own skin. I was uncomfortable in my life. I was aware of that. I didn't know why. I didn't know if there was a way to get any relief from that, but that's how it felt. And I can relate to that because that's how it felt for me. If you look, you may notice that that's how it felt for you to be a child and then an adolescent, right? That it wasn't necessarily easy, to experience that. And then this teacher that I've been studying recently said at the age of 24, he woke up. Now, what does he mean by that? It means that he realized that who he thought he wasn't who he really was. And he realized that who he really was the awareness, was the consciousness, which is real, which is here, which is actual, right? And which has been there all along from the first breath. And then this particular individual went on for the next 10 or 15 years and didn't say much about it because he didn't know what to say. He thought maybe he was crazy, maybe he was different, right? And then through conversations with his friends about this, he started to notice that they were very interested in what he was talking about, right? And then they started to tell him, when we have these conversations about consciousness and awareness and the truth and so forth, that I feel like it's changing me, that there's something happening when I involve myself in these conversations and when I practice meditation, something's happening. So this person then decided that maybe it would be a good idea for him to start to share this on a larger scale, right? And so he's one of the newer Advaita teachers. He's one of the newer consciousness teachers out there now. And what's that? Angelo DeLullo. Yeah. He has a new book out. What's it called? Awake? It's called Awake. It's on Amazon.
Excellent book.
Yeah. And the thing I like about him is that he's a very straight talker kind of teacher, you know what I mean? He doesn't use a lot of traditional language from the East. He says that the experience of awakening happens differently for each person, according to your unique individual personality and your unique experiences. That's an important difference from the Eastern teachings where they say, the way it happens is this way. And then you're comparing yourself all the time to the gurus and, am I like them and did I have that experience, And what this guy is saying is that we have to get away from that. We have to be more open to the idea that people experience waking up in many different ways. But the thing that is the same is that the profound shift that occurs is one in which the way they see things is very different, and the way they relate to other people is very different, and the way they experience life is very different. That's the real test. How that came about in terms of how you awoke, how you came out of the way you were to the way you are, right? That's very unique from one person to the next. Yeah, and so he speaks about it that way, and he talks about it in a way that, and this is the other thing, he talks about it in a way, and I think this is the way we have to learn to talk about it in the West. He talks about it in a way where all of us can wake up. This is not rare, this is not unusual. All of us can wake up. Because we all have the same consciousness, right? And that's the bottom line. You know, you and me have the same consciousness that Jesus Christ had, that Buddha had, that Lao Tse had, you know, that all the great teachers had. And one of the things they said was that you are the same as me. And the reason I'm teaching what I'm teaching is so you can experience what's possible for you as a human being. Yeah, he's a non-dual teacher.
Okay, good.
Yeah, he's a non-dual teacher. And so whether you call it Advaita Vedanta or non-duality, you know, it's the highest form of consciousness teaching is non-dual teaching. Why? Because non-duality is a fact. Because non-duality is the truth. That's why. And any teaching that doesn't go as far as that to teach non-duality can't offer you the full possibility. It's as simple as that. And so he's a non-dual teacher. One of the things about him that I like is that he doesn't just talk about how to instigate your awakening, you know what I mean? How to cause your awakening to occur. He talks about that a lot. But he also talks about after that initial awakening, then what? You know, then what? And that's a big conversation because a lot of people believe or feel that they've had the experience of awakening, that they recognize that they are the awareness, right? But then after that, they feel like they lose it. And then they doubt whether they did recognize it. So it's crazy making, right? So you really do need a lot of support after that initial awakening for you to understand how to navigate your way after that. Because after that, what happens is there are times when, through the practice of meditation and through the awakening itself, there are times when you are in clarity. You know, there are times when you are seeing things as they are. You see your own mind, you see your body, you see your life as it is, and you're able to be skillful in your interactions. You're able to experience happiness and well-being and fulfillment and so forth, right? But then, and this is after awakening, but then there are other times when you go into thinking, right? And you get caught up in thinking and lost in thought. And then part of that experience is, well, maybe I didn't get it yet. Maybe I still have to do more work to realize my true nature. When in fact, that may not be true. You've realized your true nature, right? But because you still get caught up in the thought process, right? Once you're in the thought process, right? Then you get doubtful thoughts, fearful thoughts, right? And then you're unsure, well, did I really have this experience or not, you see? So that's a very important part after the initial wake up, after the initial realization of your true nature. And this guy is very good at helping people with that and talking to them about how that works. One of the things that I heard him talk about after the awakening that was helpful to me was he was saying that after the awakening, two things are typical for people. One is that thinking becomes something that you experience as being uncomfortable. And I'm not talking about the kind of thinking you do when you're actively involved and functioning in your life, doing your job, you know, all the practical things. No. But the default state, all the rest of the thinking, right, that goes on, mind wandering, when you don't have to focus your attention, that experience of thinking becomes very uncomfortable after you've woken up, okay? And along with that, being around people and being in social situations starts to become very uncomfortable too. And there's reasons for that, right? Because when you're in the thinking mind, right, you're in the fear-based thought process, right? You're in the survival machine process. You're in a state in which it is removed from the direct experience of life, right? And so it's more uncomfortable than it ever was now, because you now know that there is another way to be. You now know that you can be relaxed and directly experience life instead of being in your head all the time. So that is a period that lasts for a while after you've awoken. And it starts to gradually change where you spend more time in the awareness and less time in the thought process, right? And then that clears up on its own over time. But it's important to know that, so you know if you're in that experience that you don't have to doubt yourself. You don't have to doubt whether you know the truth. And then you can actively work with, when you find yourself in the thinking process, right? You can actively work with that, to actively lessen the amount of time you spend in that state of mind, right? That becomes very uncomfortable, right? If you walk down the street and you smile at people that are coming in your direction, right? You're operating outside of the habitual common way of being, which is that you don't look at other people because that's a threat, right? But when you're awake and you know who you are and you know that awareness is never threatened and you're interested in being related to life and related to people, it becomes a natural thing to smile at people, right? Now, you may not be there yet, but practicing being that way helps you to get there. You see what I'm saying? So practicing smiling at other people when they're coming at you is a way of being receptive and open and vulnerable. And that's a natural state.
And you're not doing it for their reaction, you're doing it to give yourself to them.
You're doing it to experience the experience of being awake and being open and being connected to your heart center. See, that's the way it is for most people most of the time. How other people react to me determines how I behave, even if that's crazy, okay? So now we're saying, no, start behaving in a sane way, even if other people react to that. But not everybody will. It's a mistake to say, oh, everybody will misunderstand and people will get pissed off. A lot of people will smile back, right? Because a lot of people are hoping somebody else on the planet can smile. You know what I mean? A lot of people are hoping and waiting to make contact with some real, authentic relationship with other human beings. So, it's part of a practice. Well, when you're awake, you start noticing that you start getting the same thoughts that teachers get. You start seeing the same thing they're talking about. And the more exposure you have to those different voices, the better, because the point is to get to a place where you see it for yourself. That you hear it from different voices, you hear it for the Eastern approach, you hear it from this new guy from the Western approach, but the point is you start to see what they're pointing at for yourself, and now it's yours. Now the wisdom is your wisdom. Now the awakening is your awakening. Now the truth is your truth. You're no longer dependent on somebody else to give it to you. And if you go through difficulties and you've gotten that far, just by staying with it, it will reveal itself to you. It'll resolve itself.